Hi, I'm Dick Lee, and you're listening to Music Existence.
Welcome back to another instance of Music Existence, the newly revamped Music Existence at that, where because of music, we exist. We have a very special guest with me today is Singapore pop icon Dick Lee. He recently re-released his big album, The Mad Chinaman, on gold vinyl for National Day, which was originally released in 1989, and now he's prepping for his decennial concert series. This is DL50, and it's especially poignant because it commemorates when his career began back in 1974. Good morning, Dick Lee.
Hello from Singapore.
It's an honor to have you, man. So, how has preparations gone for this tour?
Well, this is well not exactly a tour. It's just a couple of concerts on my birthday next week.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
happy birthday, man.
thank you. All my albums have been released on my birthday so I thought I'd just mark it with a little show, and it's a very different show. It's a solo show. Um, so it's just me and the piano, and I'm gonna talk, walk my audience through what made me what I am.
Essentially, yeah, that's what you have to, because it's like your formative years over the span of 5 decades, if you believe it.
I
I mean,
know. Wow. How did I get here?
yeah. Well, you look great, you sound great. It's good to
Thank you.
see you. And take me back to the very beginning. I mean, that's when your life story album came about, and I'll give you so much credit. You know, you recently uh, released through YouTube your whole catalog, so I was able to
Yeah. Yeah,
like
I thought,
browse all
because
the albums and all the progression and the musical growth. It's awesome, man. Tell me a bit about that.
a lot of the albums are not available on online. So
Yeah, yeah, and I know on Discogs they're ridiculously expensive and hard
yeah,
to get.
I had to buy some of my own vinyl back because
Whoa!
yeah, I know. I don't know, through the years, and the very sad thing is that the 1980s albums have been deleted because the masters were lost in a fire. So,
Jesus.
yeah, so well, they just lost fire. But luckily I have the vinyls, and whatever I didn't have, I had to buy from Discogs. And I decided to put them all out. So there's one more set coming next Monday, next week, yeah. The last of the set. So yeah, I'm very happy to have them all available now, so anyone can listen to them anytime.
Nice. That's really awesome. And I'm hoping for an official kind of re-release. I mean, I know like the masters are gone in the bar, but whatever you can manage, just so it's all available on all
Yeah.
platforms, because your legacy needs to be preserved based on what you've done.
Thank you for saying that.
And so your your song Life Story was kind of like the first, it's very ambitious because you're only 18 years old and you're
Yeah.
basically
Not much
explaining
life.
what you want the trajectory of your life to sort of be. So how did that song come about?
It was kind of like a subconscious wish of mine to not go the usual route that us kids were expected to go. And I just wanted to sort of like pretend that I'm looking ahead, like I'm ahead looking back, and I just want to in fact, the song is ironic. It's describing an ordinary life, and it's a life that I didn't really want, but I told myself, okay, if I have an ordinary life, it'll be fine. So life story is, this is just a guy who just went through everything that is supposed to go through, and I sort of like didn't want to go through that.
Right.
So yeah, it's an ironic song, but I think a bit mature for my age. I actually wrote it when I was 16.
16. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, I know. And I mean, you need a bit of context about Singapore, in the history of pop music in Singapore.
I know that as you released that album, the clampdown was happening. So, like, how did
Yeah,
that
exactly.
affect the release?
Well, badly. I mean, what happened? How I got my first offer, the first deal was that, see, I was in a singing group in school, and we were taking part in talent contests because that was the only way we could perform. We could, you know, do perform and sing. We had to take part in talent shows, and I was in a singing group when I was 16. So I started writing songs, and I wanted the group to sing the songs, and they didn't really want to. So I left the group and went solo. And so I took part in competitions singing my own songs. And this is in 1973, when nobody was interested. I mean, the music industry basically collapsed.
It's down the toilet.
Yeah,
It was
nothing.
down the
Yeah,
toilet. After
it
the
was
quest, after Naomi and the boys,
yeah,
all that scene, it's like Chris Ho said, it was gone. It was wiped out.
ice age. It was our ice age. Yeah, so this came my debut came about like 3, 4 years after everything had just died. So it
Yeah.
was difficult. So I took part in this talent show, right? And um the guy who auditioned me, okay, for this talent competition was the lead singer of the Quest. His name is Vernon Cornelius, and
Yeah, yeah, Vernon Cornelius, I
you
know.
know about him, right? So he was the one. He was working at the radio station that organized the competition. So he auditioned me, and when I sang Life Story at that audition.
Right.
And he said he liked it. He liked the fact that I wrote my own song, so he decided to put me in the competition as a guest artist, a guest performer. And he asked me to come on every week and sing my own songs. And that was my first real break. And at the end of the competition for the grand finals, one of the judges was a guy from EMI Records. And that was the main record company in Singapore in the 60s that released the Quest and all the bands. Everything was under this EMI. And this guy was, his name is Ross Barnett, and he was from London. And he was working there, and he was looking for somebody like me. So when he judged the competition, and I turned up, and I sang Fried Rice Paradise, which is a song I wrote, that I tried to make a
I
Singapore song.
noticed too that that was actually, I've heard of the 80s version, but the
Yeah.
70s, that was actually on your first album. I didn't know that.
Yep. So it was my first attempt at writing a Singapore song. And he, being a foreigner, he recognized that it was a very original and Singaporean song. So he actually offered me, it's just like in a dream. He came backstage after the show and offered me a recording contract. So what happened was that he took the idea back to the EMI office. So he wasn't the boss, right? He had a boss, a local boss. And this guy said, his boss said, forget it, because no one who cares about
It's about Singaporean music.
Singapore songs, and who
About
cares
local
about original?
music,
Yeah,
lah.
local singers, 18-year-old kid, like forget it. So
It's a kid
so
only,
he nixed
lah.
yeah, he nixed the project. So you know what, Ross Barnett believed in me so much, and he was so outraged, that the company wouldn't sign me. He quit his job, and he funded my album Life Story with his own money. He created a label called Ladder Records, and then he got Polydor to release it. So that I owe him as well. I mean, wherever you are, Ross Barnett, thank you because that was my first. So that's why 50 years ago in August 1974, Life Story came out. Thanks. Thanks to Vernon and Ross.
Vernon and Ross, yeah,
Yeah.
great guys. Thanks them. Thanks to them.
Yeah.
Like, when you have songs like Rebel Rebel and
But David Bowie,
Death
yeah.
of a Whore,
Okay,
like,
that wasn't me. That was Ross. Ross was
okay,
a Bowie
he
fan,
was
and he thought that
responsible.
I was a kind of David Bowie
I
person.
really like that synth in Death of a Whore. It kind of gives it that kind of eerie tone, and
Yeah,
I guess people were like kind of scared up.
yeah, yeah. So you know that Fried Rice Paradise. Then when the album was released, Fried Rice Paradise was banned by the government radio station.
Yeah,
And that was so like crazy because they said because I use Singlish in it, and Singlish is the kind of our patois, it's a
yeah, I
kind of,
know.
yeah,
Like,
Singlish, right?
yeah,
So
like you say, shock too, which
sure,
is really
yeah.
cool.
And the government didn't allow it. They said no, no, no. It's the English
Come
is
and
not.
baila.
Yeah, I mean that was then. Things are different now, but
Yeah, yeah, and like especially for 1974 in a Singaporean context, you were that rebel. You were daring,
the
and
rebel,
thanks to
rebel.
the support that you had,
Yeah,
and then you
yeah,
came back in 1979 with International Land, and that's when
yeah.
um, you kind of ventured into kind of new wave. So um, putting your formative influences together, how was that
Mhm.
fostered when you were growing up? What was your musical environment like, and what did you listen to? Was it a little bit of that local sound, that rock and roll, plus whatever you got into? You
When
know,
I was a kid, it was pretty much what we had available, and the radio was playing a lot of pop, like British pop, a lot of bubblegum pop
oh man,
in the 60s, and I listened to that. But my greatest influence was probably Burt Bacharach
okay,
because the how pop songs in the 60s were quite mature. They were
yeah,
they were
yeah, very
yeah,
lush.
yeah, Dionne Warwick was a pop star, as along with say um the Beatles, you know what I mean? So there were two different kinds, but I listened to a lot of Dionne Warwick, that kind of music because of my mom. She played that sort of thing, and I learned about chord structures from Burt Bacharach and some British composers like Tony Hatch, who wrote for Petula Clark. So I listened to a lot of that. And then later on, when I became more cool, like sort of like in my early teens, my cousin went to London, went to England to boarding school. And when he came back, he gave me Elton John, Joni Mitchell records.
Oh, of
So
course.
yeah, the first three artists, Joni Mitchell, Elton John, and Neil Young, these were the three that changed my perspective. And I started to write more like that kind of singer-songwriter type of songs. So that led to Life Story.
Yeah, life story, and then like I said, international land.
International Land. By the time I wrote International Land, I was studying in London. I was doing a course at fashion design.
Yeah, fashion design
Right.
course, I
Yeah,
remember.
yeah. I was right in the new wave. I arrived and punk was changing to new wave. So I was in the middle of that. And being in fashion, like we were all very trendy. We're very on trend. So yeah, so I wrote that song. And the interesting thing about why that song got released was that this guy who is the third person that changed my life is a
It's
man
Jimmy
named
Wee,
Jimmy
right?
Wee.
Jimmy
Yeah,
Wee.
you know about him? Yeah. So Jimmy Wee was working in EMI as a graphic designer when Life Story got rejected by EMI. So he remembered me from there. And so when he ended up he opened WEA Records, right, which is the one Electro Atlantic in Singapore. He headed it. And so I think he opened it around 1979. So he asked me to try and do a single. I think I was one of the first EPs or singles that he released under Warner. under WEA in the late 70s. And then when I finally came back from my studies in 1982, that's when
That's
he
when
was
Regal
really speaking
Vigor
out.
and
Yeah,
Zirconrons,
exactly. Yeah.
Kussmaul and all that.
And
That's when
and
you
the
played
first thing I
keyboards, right?
yeah, the first thing I did when I came back was play keyboards for Chris on Regal Vigor. And then the next
How
thing I
was
did,
that experience? I know that Chris was saying that the end result of Regal Vigor was very murky, very not what he wanted. Were you there like actively as part of the process, or was it just for the keyboard parts?
I think that my contribution was that I added the keyboard, which gave it a that sort of added to the texture
Yeah, like
of
in Savior,
yeah.
right?
Well, I don't know if that's what he wanted, but it was what I could do. And
Yeah.
it's not exactly my genre, a little bit close to what I was doing in the UK, but no, but I played with him on stage as well, so yeah, I was sort of like kind of like a side member of the band of the group.
And like,
Yeah,
everyone regards you as like this big pop guy, but you made a very
yeah,
underground post-punk new wave record, which
yep.
is surprising.
Well, there was the kind of music I was doing at that time. I've got some demos from that period, from the early 80s, where I had a TIAC 4-track cassette multi-track, and I had my Jupiter 8, and I was making kind of like edgy new wave music at first, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a really cool kind of experimental time. And you
Yeah.
really took risks because, in 84 you came out with Life in the Lion City, which again was kind of a huge, undertaking because the Singapore music scene was kind of in its healing stages. And then here you come out again with this very new wave, very
Yeah.
like pro culture Singapore, very like, and of course people are going to be like, what is he doing now?
Exactly. Yeah. Like why and why? Why is he do like what's the big deal? Because that was a time when I think Singapore was just in the midst of growing,
Yeah,
of trying to get out of third world status.
trying to get out of the Anita Sarawak and Tracy Huang era and
Exactly.
make
Yeah.
room for new blood.
Yep. And they didn't. So my Singapore theme songs didn't matter to them. Like they didn't. It didn't affect them. They were saying like, why is he doing this? And what's this about Singapore? Like it. I think they were uncomfortable with it, or they basically didn't care about it. So that also told me, okay, trying to be Singaporean in my work is just not on, like not relevant. So I gave up that idea until the Mad Chinaman.
Yeah, wow. So like in the groove between the gap between those albums, you came out with Return to Beauty World, and that's when you became friends with Sydney Tan, and you were two
Yeah.
were bonding over like the West Coast kind of jazz groups, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
really reflected in Return to Beauty World. So
Yeah. It's a
that's a
crazy thing.
good that's a good album, man. Like, how about with that? Were you like really into jazz at that time? Like once
Very,
that time came
very
around?
much, especially with Sydney's influence. So we met around that time, and because life in a Lion City didn't work, so I thought, okay, forget about being Singaporean. Let's just do what we love, and that was a sound that we both love. I was a big Bob James fan as well.
Oh man.
Yeah. So and Al Jarreau, so we did an album like that, and it's one of my favorite albums, that one,
Hmm.
because it's like really me. I was able to express what I love without caring about identity or anything. Although identity is important, was important, but
And it's
yeah,
really ironic because you were doing pro Singapore songs and everyone is so proud in Singapore about the hawker centers and all the community and whatnot. Here you were basically selling and repping the country to the highest end, like a very creative experimental degree, and classic Singaporean indifference. They're just like, we don't care, lah. He's just a kid.
No, no. And they thought it was weird. They didn't find it, amusing at all. I mean, I was like also poking fun a little bit. But they know it. Do you know the phenomenon of the national songs? Have you been following the
Yeah,
story?
yeah. Or just
So
the songs for National Day.
yeah, the national. Okay, so these songs played a very important role in shaping our national identity because they only appeared in 1984.
Oh,
And
wow.
from 1984 to 1984 to about 88, three very important songs came out every year, three or four. And these songs were played and played, and they somehow helped our to build our national pride, I would say, because they were performed in our National Day celebration and National Day parades. And and this every year when a new song came out, it just galvanized the people. People started to feel this sense of Singaporeanness. And ironically, these songs were written by white guys, white dudes from Canada and Australia. So
Wow.
yeah, and they were actually commissioned by the government. They commissioned ad agencies to come out like jingles, and so these Canadian this Canadian guy, and so they wrote the songs and then launched it onto the public, and everyone was singing. So by the time I did Mad Chinaman in 1989, there was a strong sense already, a much stronger sense of being Singaporean. So I thought I'll try one last time, and it worked, because in the 5 years between Life in the Lion City and Mad Chinaman, Singapore suddenly found its mojo. And so I got that's what led to my going to Japan and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah,
The,
and you also
the
you
country
also have,
embraced me.
yeah, you also
Yeah.
have a history with Jacintha, and that's with your Connections album. And even to this day, her talent as an artist still resonates with you. And when you think back to when you first collaborated together, what struck you about her, and what continues to resonate with you about her today?
We met when we were in high school. So
Oh, wow.
yeah. When I was writing songs, when I was first writing songs, I couldn't sing. I mean, I don't consider myself a singer at all, even to this day. I had to learn how to sing because no one would sing my songs. I had to sing them. But she was a good friend of mine, and she sang my songs, and I wrote a lot of songs for her. So I don't know if you heard her album called Silence.
No, I haven't.
Okay, that is, I think, one of the best Singapore albums to ever come out. And after Regal Vigor, Warner asked me to produce her album. So
Wow.
before I did Life in Lion City, I produced her entire album. I wrote all the songs, played all the tracks, and it was like 100% me. And then she sang it. It's called Silence, and I'm going to try and put it out on YouTube as well. And then after that, I did Life in the Lion City. So my first real project was her album. And later on, you know that we got married, right? Are you aware of
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I
Yeah,
remember
we got
your
married.
marriage,
Yeah, for
92, right?
a while, but right now, I mean, she's gigging now. I mean, she did a bunch of jazz albums, um, high quality, like what do you call that? The high, I forgot what it's called, like
High concept,
no, the very high quality sound. What do you call those albums?
like hi-fi or something, like
Yeah, done in
audiophile.
recorded audiophile,
Okay,
recorded
yeah.
in LA and everything. She did, so she went in that direction. So now she's singing jazz at hotels. Yep.
Oh,
But
wow. So,
yeah, but we did have a good history together of writing songs. She was my muse, I would say.
oh, okay. So
Yeah.
she really believed in you alongside like your mother, who was your biggest,
Supporter.
musical influence, like she always encouraged you, like outside of that, Jacinta was really instrumental in like just fleshing out your songcraft too, and also building up your your chops as a singer.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I owe
And
them both.
then that's awesome. And then, like you mentioned, Mad Chinaman, and like it's such a huge album, like stylistically and thematically, and you really get into character on a bunch of
Yeah.
the songs. So, what was the intention behind Mad Chinaman?
Well, it was just the year before Mad Chinaman came out, I did a musical called Beauty World, and Beauty World was a very Singaporean musical, and it was hugely successful. The audience sort of embraced the Singaporeanness in the show, so that encouraged me to try again, and especially with the national songs and the sentiment of Singapore people. I thought, okay, maybe this is the. I'll give it one last go, and so I did. I recorded songs about my environment, about our multiculturalism in Singapore, and I looked at what we had that made us multicultural, and I realized I use a lot of folk songs. So Indian, Chinese, Malay songs, I put them all in. And the one thing I did realize was that we didn't have our own folk songs because all our ethnic folk songs came from other countries. But that's what made us what we were. So I mixed them all up. I did this big mashup. And remember, this was a time of fusion music, right? This was the fusion era, you know,
Right.
and Paul Simon and like Talking Heads, and then there was this whole global mashup,
Yeah, mishmash of like
right?
international sounds and all that.
Yeah, all mixed up together with Western stuff, and so I thought I'd do it. I thought it was a good time to do that, but from a Singapore context.
Wow.
And what I didn't realize was that by mixing everything up, made it Singaporean. And that's what Japan recognized. The journalists in Japan and the producers, when they heard it, they recognized that it was something unique, something Asian, but different from anything else that was around. And that's how I ended up going to Japan.
So you think, so when you think back, what was the contrast between when you first started out writing these very Singapore-oriented songs versus now? Like when you now this is not the early to mid 80s, now this is the late 80s. Did the reception to it start changing? Did they start warming up to you at that point by the time of Mad Chinaman?
Yes, there was a controversy that happened that sort of boosted it because the album opens with a track called Rasa Sayang,
Yeah,
which is a
Rasta
rap.
Sayang.
Yeah, and it's a rap. I mean, look, I'm the first Singapore rapper. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah. I
rap.
was gonna ask you about that. Like, that's
Yeah,
like this album has like early hip hop influence, and
yeah,
the other time I heard that was with Mark Richmond and Upman Hamza on Chris Ho's album Night Songs and Day Glow. They do like a rap between each other on
yeah.
Chris Ho's album. So you two were like the first hip hop influenced artists in Singapore in the
And I
80s
wanted
too, when it was
I wanted
still
to do
like,
it in a Singapore way, you know what I mean? I wanted to take all the influences I had but make it Singaporean. I think the biggest well, anyway, back to that song, right? What happened was that it's full of Singlish. And when the album came out, it was banned again for exactly the same reason as Fried Rice Paradise, banned from airplay. And the big difference in 1989 was that the local media supported me. And they wrote and complained that why the hell are we banning something that we all speak? Why are we ashamed of who we are and everything? and they made a big noise, and the stations released they unbanned the song.
Wow.
And
So
because
they
of the
actually got
controversy,
behind you this time.
yeah, they got behind me, and the buzz around that made pushed the song to platinum. My album became platinum, like I think the first local album to get platinum status.
And I really
Because
liked it. I really liked the Rasa music video. You have your friends Mo,
yeah,
Leslie, and Rizal. And
and
I love,
you realize it's like Chinese, Indian, Malay,
yeah,
Eurasian.
yeah, like they all like encompass, the cultures. And I love also they do 1, 2, 3 and winner, runda,
Yeah,
murder,
in every language, yeah. So
satu,
that's
dua, tiga. And like I love, yeah, son. I love like that transition between each chorus, like the interplay between you, like as you talk about what you talk about. I mean, it
yeah.
is hokey, it is cheesy, but it's also educational. So they have
It's
that to thank
it's
for it.
it it's my it was the 80s take on Fried Rice Paradise.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it worked. So it worked really, really well. The song, that pushed me up the charts, and even, well, led me to Japan. So yeah, I'm so happy that
And that's
that
that's
changed
when
my life.
Asia Major came out. That was you did your Japan tour, and I saw
Yeah.
you were also on a TV show called Punkicles, where you did the
Yeah, Punky King.
Lumpia song,
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
the Singapore
I,
variant of Junkin Punk.
yeah, yeah, opera song. Nina Pony is
What's
the
that
song.
like having like TV spots? Did you feel like, oh, I've made it this time? I'm big
I
time now.
I lived in Japan. I moved to Japan in 1990, and I was signed. So Warner Japan took over my contract,
Okay.
and I moved there, and I basically had my career based there for 7 years. And I worked all around Asia, but out of Japan. That was a crazy time. I mean, I never dreamt that I would ever get to that level in my career. And I started late. When I went to Japan, I was already 33. To start a
I'm
music.
33.
Okay.
Yeah,
Wow. Oh, yes, your baby.
yeah. Baby lap.
Have you been to Singapore?
No, but I have a lot of Singaporean friends and they've been helping me dig up like the records, because the back catalog of the 80s and 90s and 70s, it's so hard to find. So you have friends in high places that are able
Uh,
to. I'm super thankful for that, you know.
wow, that's wonderful. How did you get into, or I'm interviewing you now.
Yeah.
How did you get into Singapore music? Or is
Well,
it world music in general
is
that
this
you're
well, um my dad used to go to Japan, for business. He worked for Sony. So he worked like in the audio department. So he would bring home like prototype audio recorders and whatnot. But he
Mm,
also had Japanese friends who gave him like local music. So I got into like Puffy Amiyumi. And then since I was a teenager and YouTube started exploding, I went down the list of like Asian countries. Okay, let's see what's happening in Japan. Okay, I have all these bands from all these different decades. Let's try China now. And then it's like, okay, Sui Jian, Tang Dynasty, all that stuff. And then it's like
oh
Philippines, and then Mongolia, and then eventually
my God.
Singapore. 90s, 80s, the Class X stuff, and then, Anita Serrano, Tracy Wong, and then, of course, Dick Lee.
Yay.
So,
Okay, and that's interesting. So what do you think about, K-pop and all that? Are you following all of that now?
uh, K-pop, I mean, it gave America a refreshing dose of, good catchy music, and they're very um they're very good with like capturing our kind of retro inspired ilk that we kind of move on every couple years, but they're still at a place where they recognize the importance of that good, catchy songwriting. And, in as just a kind of a blanket reference to Asian music, it's like your music in Singapore deserves to be heard, deserves to be on the level with the greats. Like, I consider you a great pop, rock, every genre singer songwriter that deserves to be up there with the
Wow.
McCartneys and the Lennons and Elton John, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Me,
Wow.
you're like that with Singapore, so it means a lot to me. you
Thank you
know.
so much for saying that. Really. I'm
To transition with that, going back to what Chris Ho was saying about the Singapore industry, he said without Jimmy Wee, there'd be no Jacintha, there'd be no Lizards Convention, there'd be no Humpback Oak, and there definitely wouldn't be a Dick Lee phenomenon. So, do you agree with that? Do you think because of Jimmy Wee, you had the astounding success you've had now?
Jimmy, w- when life in the Lion City didn't work. In fact, everything he released so many local acts, and they all didn't work. And the reason they didn't work, one of the main reasons was piracy. The early 80s was the worst period of piracy. Like you could buy, say, a Michael Jackson cassette for $2 Singapore dollars, and my cassette was $8. Like who wants to spend $6 more on some local thing, when you can get Michael Jackson for a fraction of the price. So that was one problem. But the beautiful thing about Jimmy Wee was that he persisted. He never gave up, and he kept releasing albums for us. I had six albums with him. Yeah, Mad Chinaman was my eighth. So I had 7 albums. He released 7 albums for me when they all didn't work. But he just said, no, let's keep trying. Let's keep trying. And when I did the Mad Chinaman, I told him, okay, can I do one last try? And he agreed. And I think he got into a bit of trouble. I suspect he got into trouble with the parent, with headquarters, because he was spending all this money releasing local albums that were not selling. But what I did to help him was that in the 80s, I had an event company called Runway Productions, and I did promotions. In those days, we could do cigarette promotions. And my big client was Marlboro Lights, and earlier than that, I had another one, Salem.
Oh
Now,
man.
Salem, and I got my client because I was doing promotions for them. I
Yeah.
got them to finance my albums. So I helped Jimmy. So he didn't have to pay so much. So if you look at this album called Connections, it's from
Mhm.
1987.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a real heavy new wave album. That album was fully sponsored by Marlboro Lights. Yeah.
Whoa.
And Connections is the name of a club, a Marlboro Light. Can you imagine a smokers club? A smokers club
I would have
connect.
no idea. No idea,
Yeah.
man.
So that album was like recorded and then like a giveaway. It was used as a giveaway in the promotion. So yeah, so I did my part to help Jimmy defray some costs. But it was him that really kept promoting, and then when Japan offered me, he negotiated for Japan Warner to take over my contract from him. So he basically let me go because he saw, I could have a better future. And then he left Warner and started Spring Roll. Did you know about that?
Yeah,
He
Spring
started
Roll, yeah.
well, yeah, and then he released more albums, but with his own money, and I think that was
So that's
his.
where all like the indie scene, the alternative
Yeah,
90s scene, Humpback Oak,
yeah,
the
in the 2000s,
Padres, everything.
in the 90s, sorry, yeah, in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
90s.
90s, yeah.
But that was his sort of like downfall in a way because of I think just lost a lot of money.
And Chris Ho too, he got in trouble with radio because,
Yeah,
they always thought in quoting his words in his intonation, he was foolish and stupid
yeah.
to like promote
Okay.
talent.
The thing why I'm still around is that I've never been political. I've never been openly,
No.
overtly political. I just toe the line and I reflect the public sentiment, but I'm not a rebel anymore in that sense, like how what Chris was. I mean, did you ever speak to Chris?
I would have loved to speak to Chris. I've
Yeah.
spoke to him with in comment threads. He was super
Oh,
nice and I wanted to interview him. I wanted to interview because the anniversary of Wriggle Vigor in
mm,
like or Zirconloun's formation 1982, it was just around the corner and so, like, he, and this is Facebook terms, he hearted my comment. I've said, one day I'd love to interview you to get the Circumlounge story, your love for Thailand, you're
yeah.
a very, you know, storied guy, and you have a really good history, but I didn't know that he was battling illness, with stomach cancer. And I mean, did you know any of that?
No,
Like
no,
during,
he didn't.
wow.
He didn't even know. He didn't know. He had pain, but he just ignored it. And when he finally got too bad, it was too late. And then he passed away very soon after the diagnosis, like months, 2, 3 months. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that was really unfortunate. But do you know that I have a duet with him called Deeper?
Yeah, and one of the last things, it's funny you mentioned that. One of the last things that I was informed on was you can see the guitars in the background.
Yeah.
I write my own songs, I write my own original music, but I also did covers. And one of the last things he saw was my cover of Deeper.
Oh wow.
And, I mean, you can check it out
Yeah,
for
I will.
yourself after the interview, but and comment on it. I always appreciate comments. But he said that was really well done. You know, it was really nice that you did that. And and again, nobody knew about his illness. Nobody knew about his age either because he looked
Yeah,
very young. He looked
yeah.
very young, but he was
He's older than
67.
me.
Yeah, he
He's
was
older than me, okay?
7,
Just so
but
you know.
now he's turning 70 now. So, happy
Yeah.
70th up there, Chris Ho. We both miss you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He's a maverick. He was a maverick.
He was uniquely on his time and ahead of his time too. And
Yeah.
so going back to your career trajectory, I mean, you mentioned having uh, uh, especially, you know, uh, a boost, getting that boost from Japan. You did an album called Hong Kong Rhapsody, and then also Compass, where you sing in Mandarin, and
Cantonese in Cantonese. Yeah.
Cantonese. Sorry about, but but it's cool, like how you branched out, and then Secret Island in Singapore. You make your you. It's like you enhanced your sound for the modern age, and it's that subtle kind of stylistic growth that I appreciate. It's not entirely outward abrupt. It's like you're fully aware of your songcraft and you just expand it, you just keep going, and that's what I always admired about it.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, I am a songwriter. That's what I call myself. I write songs. And it's I've sustained myself, my career from songwriting more than anything else, especially at this point. Um, I am commissioned songs. I just wrote this year I had two commissions by the government. They
Oh
asked,
man.
yeah, there's one song that's I think it's on Spotify. It's called Lau Pa Sat, which is the name of a market. It's like 200-year-old market, and they are having this anniversary, so they commissioned a song from me. And I have another song coming out in September, which is it's called Because We Can, and it's a song for seniors because
Oh
senior.
man.
Yeah, we have a senior division in Singapore because we're aging population, all that. So there are lots of groups or
All these old uncle uncle
uncle, yeah, uncle,
yeah.
auntie.
Oh
So
yo.
there are these. This is a campaign to encourage volunteers to look after seniors. So yeah, I wrote a song, and then during COVID, I was stuck at home, and I reconnected with my friend, the piano, and I started writing songs again. And it was a real
Is that
cathartic.
your collab with Raya C?
Yeah. No, well, the most important thing was that I've made a band. I formed a band called Omnitones.
Only tones, yeah.
Yeah, and I said, I mean, what do I do with these songs that I write, So I said, why don't I do like what I used to do like before I jammed, And I just went on Instagram and I said, I just DM'd young musicians and I said, hey, would you like to play together? And they all said yes, and we formed they were 25 years old, all of them, when
Uh-huh.
we when we started.
Were
And
they
it was
fans of your music? Or...
it's like my mom is your fan, all of them is like
Oh.
at least they're not saying my grandma is your fan. But they knew of me. I mean, I have these national songs that they are familiar with, and some of my music. But it was so energizing and so refreshing to play with, you know, Gen, whatever they are, and their take on everything. And they're so talented, they're so instinctive. And they got me, they got what I was trying to do. And you can hear the tracks that we've got. So I released about four, like with Uriah as well. Yeah, so that was a real experience. And last week I did a show at the casino here, for National Day, and they commissioned a show, and they gave me a big budget. So I put them all together, 12 of them
Oh,
playing. Yeah,
make the
and they're
most
all,
of it, right?
yeah, it was such a great show. I mean, the energy they have, it was all, I had brass players, and I had these three kids called Third Degree, fantastic a cappella group. I mean, it's just so, I'm so blessed. I'm so happy that I can still be doing this with this new generation of musicians. My music living on, so
Mhm.
that it's really like something, yeah.
So, considering the career that you've had thus far and all the collaborations that you've done, all the albums that you've done from, Life Story to everything, and then getting that groove back with the omnitones and whatnot, what have you learned about yourself, not only as a musician, but as a person?
My mantra right now is let it go. Like, don't carry any baggage. And I always tell myself, if anything upsets me or bothers or stresses me, I always say it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Just be cool, just, you can do without all of this. And this helps me to be creative. This helps me to focus on my creativity. And at the end of the day, from when I was 16, or from Life Story to now, it's my creativity that has driven me, that has propelled me, and my love of creating. But to do that, you have to really take out all the unnecessary things because they cloud you, they stem your creativity, and they just hold you back.
Yeah.
So
They,
yeah,
they leave you
I've learned to
second
let things
guessing
go.
yourself, you know? They make you say, like, you can't do it.
Yeah. And it's not about pushing myself. It's just about freeing myself so that I can
Freeing. Yeah, that's the
be,
important part.
yeah, don't be so ambitious. I mean, the some they you force like forcing a round peg in a square hole or something like that. You don't, you just want it, and you just free yourself and take out all the things that get in the way, and everything will happen. This is what I
Mhm.
believe.
Then lastly, anything you'd like to say to your fans?
I wouldn't be here without their support. Without people buying tickets, without people listening to my music, without people writing to me, without people like you, Jake. So I really am so grateful, and I would say thank you very much, and keep supporting me. Although at this point of my life, I'm gonna sort of like, I don't know where it's going to go from now, but I want to take it easy and travel a lot. But I think I still have this itch to create, and I'm writing things for all of you. So thank you so much.